Tra la la. Whether you've been hijacked, got here by accident, or merely just hatched here, welcome to another episode of Fishing with Odd Bait, a lifetime without definitive expectations, where we help people explode into their lives. We're looking to help people create themselves rather than find themselves. If you're welcome nowhere else, you're welcome here. The only admission price is the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to try. And as listeners of this program know that we enjoy presenting stories of recovery and resilience, most importantly, how they did it so others can too. And welcome tonight to Miss Katie Dudas. Katie, so if you were captured by aliens and taken up into their spaceship, and you were the only representative of humankind that they had ever seen, how would you explain yourself as a human?
How would I explain? I think they would be a little worried because they think that we were all very tall. But, as I would explain myself as a human, my name is Katie, as you said. I'm a big fan of cats, being silly, and trying to find, the enjoyment in life. What kind of makes me special right now is I'm in a recovery of, breast cancer.
Okay, so could you tell us a little bit at the beginning where you came from, what happened, and what it's like now?
I was diagnosed, December 24th of 2019.
Christmas Eve.
I Yeah. That was a painful phone call at 9 AM.
Mm,
And, um, and it was interesting for me because I had spent most of 2019 taking care of my mom, who had also been diagnosed with breast cancer, so I was along for her whole journey, and I got to go from caregiver to, I guess, care receiver.
ah,
So that makes me extra unique in the journey, I guess.
okay.
Mhm,
So you received a phone call at 9 a.m. on Christmas Eve morning,
mhm.
and it wasn't an invitation to a party.
No, unfortunately. And, they had asked me when I when I had essentially, they had seen something in a mammogram, and they asked me to come back, and they did an additional mammogram and did a biopsy where they took, some samples, and they had asked me if I wanted to receive the phone call when they found out the results or if I wanted them to wait till after the holiday, and I said as soon as they knew, I wanted to know.
Okay, so you got that phone call, and tell us about your state of mind at the time, Katie.
Gosh, well, I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. So when I saw the phone ring, I was expecting them to say that, "You're okay, everything's okay," and I was just planning on going back to sleep. And when I got the phone call and when she told me that it was, malignant and it was cancer, then my it was kinda like you felt like yourself kind of detaching from yourself, and
Ah,
my brain, the decision making, the level-headed, the brain part of me took over and was like, "Okay, what do we need to do?" And I think I had having gone through it with my mom, had prepped me without me realizing I was being prepped for this moment, and I knew the questions to ask and what to talk about and, trying to figure out what's the next steps. And then it wasn't until I hung up the phone where it was like, "Oh, crap," and it really kind of hit me at that point.
okay. So, well, on the phone call, you were showing some high levels of emotional intelligence. So, tell us about after that when the reality sunk in.
I There was a moment where, I remember, like I said, I remembered everything my mom went through, and I was like, "I can't do this. Cannot do this." I had been laid off from my job 4 days beforehand, so I was still dealing with the new reality, and the new normal from that, and then having this on top of that was just like, "Oh, wait, this is a whole new thing happening here." And, I love telling the story that I went into my living room and I collapsed on the floor, and I was like, "I'm done. I can't do this." And for me, I have a cardboard cutout of Boba Fett from Star Wars
Ah,
in my living room because I don't know why you wouldn't have a cardboard cutout of a bounty hunter in your living room. And I looked up at him for whatever reason, it caught my eye, and I was like, well, if Boba Fett can survive the Sarlacc pit and come back, I can survive this. I think I said in my head, I said, if Boba Fett can survive the Sarlacc pit, I can survive this bullshit. Was
okay. Okay. So, You related your experience to another person who had gone through some extremely trying times.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it was what I needed at the moment, as silly
Okay.
as it sounds. It was just the pep talk I kinda needed to pull myself out at that moment.
So you gave yourself the pep talk.
I think so. Like, I think it was me looking for my brain kicking back in going, "Okay, we know what we're getting into, we can do this. Your mom made it through, you can do this too."
Ah, okay. So you were your own coach, your own therapist at that point. Um,
Trying.
so, Katie, who did you share this information with first?
My boyfriend,
Okay.
because we were under the same roof,
Uh-huh.
and so he knew I was waiting for the phone call, and he knew because I hadn't told. I mean, people. I had friends that knew that I had gone in for a biopsy. I had friends that had known that I'd gone in for mammogram, but no one knew that I was expecting results that soon.
Mm,
And so he was the first one to find out and having to wonder, what was going on when I was kind of losing it.
okay. When something happens, usually uh, there's different type of reactions from different people. So tell us about that, Katie.
I think so. It's interesting looking back on things now to see, how. And I was very grateful. I thank my past self for I started writing things down because I would not have remembered any of this. And honestly, I'm still finding myself processing everything again because I feel like I never actually processed it the first time through because it was so rapid fire for me and the diagnosis. And but there was definitely like going through all the stages of just shock and just feeling like I was done, and then realizing that the next day was Christmas and we were driving out to State College to see my brother's family, and my
Uh,
mom was going to my mom was going too, and I had made the conscious decision to that wasn't I wasn't telling my family until later because I
nah,
just wanted a normal Christmas.
okay. And was that accomplished?
Yeah, they had no clue.
Okay.
Which I spent a lot of, the beginning of the whole process with a lot of most people not knowing what had been going on or what had
Mm,
happened or what I was dealing with.
that's quite a parcel to be carrying around with you, Katie.
And, it was interesting. I look like I said, a lot of times I've looked back and just kind of thought things through now, and it was interesting to me, how I held it together. And then there were points where it was almost comical that everybody, people thought that I was going about things like, and I was very normal. And then inside was like, haha, you have no
Uh,
idea what's happening on the other
yes.
side of this.
So you eventually began to share.
Yes. I actually, Mike and Missy Sorg were, I think, the first one out of the household, ones out of the household that found out because we'd gone over there to tell them about feeding cats. And it was like, oh, hey, yeah, by the way. And I, we talked to them about what was going on.
Hmm.
And I like I said, I had it in my head that I didn't want to tell close family and friends because I wanted a normal Christmas. I wanted them to have a normal Christmas
Sure.
because I had no idea, like you know very few details. And I think that's one of the weird things about getting a cancer diagnosis is it takes a long time to get a diagnosis and a treatment plan.
So
And
let's
people just
stop
think it's
right
like,
so let's stop right there and talk about
mhm.
that. I imagine you were inundated with questions from friends and relatives.
So I didn't actually tell everybody until almost mid-March.
Ah,
So it had been almost 3 months the till the general public found I call it the general public found out, and I posted something publicly on social media. And to that point, I'd come up with a list of folks, um, that I wanted to tell in person, folks that I wanted to either text or call, you know what I mean? Like, it was just kind of like, and the list was it was very much alive, and it would change daily of who getting a phone call and who was gonna get what information first. And but it was like,
so
oh, yeah,
tell us
sorry.
about the lack of information on your part, the lack of information that you were receiving, the questions that you had.
So what happens with the cancer diagnosis is I knew that it was malignant tumor, and that was pretty much all I knew in the beginning. One of the other stumbling blocks for me in this whole process is, I mentioned that I had lost my job. My insurance ran out at the end of that year of 2019.
Ah,
So we had to find a way to get every single appointment we could fit in before the end of the year when I still had insurance, because that was just another thing just hanging over. And, holiday time, the hospitals and things aren't open on Christmas Day. They're not open on Christmas Eve. They're not doing these tests. And it to get so essentially when you find out it's a malignant tumor, and then you got to find out what kind of cancer it is. So there was, and make sure where it's spread to. So there's CT scans, there's MRIs, there are they tested the DNA of the tumor to determine whether or not it was going to respond to chemo, more biopsies, X-rays, uh, gosh, and not to mention, a lot of blood work. And on top of all that, I elected to do fertility treatments to freeze eggs.
okay.
So there was ultrasounds, and it was unreal the list of all the appointments I had before I had a final diagnosis and treatment plan.
Okay. So how much of this were you able to fit in before the end of the year? We're talking like 6 days.
I had 8 appointments in 6 days.
Ah, wow. So
Yeah.
how did those appointments get accomplished? I know a lot of people, I would probably suspect, and this is just a hunch, that you didn't take no for an answer.
I have to, McGee did a wonderful job of fitting me in, and they knew my situation, and they were trying to help out as best they could,
Mhm.
which was fantastic, and I can't, tell them how much I appreciate that. And but it was a lot of, like, how many appointments can we have in one day? Like, how many places can we fit in and try to get these things done? And, it was interesting to me because I didn't tell my mom right away what was going on, obviously, and we share locations on our phones.
Ah,
And I went to the first round of appointments with my phone turned off
mm,
because I didn't want her to see where I was because I
okay.
knew she'd be like, "Hmm."
Who were some of the people closest to you that you told? And we'd like to hear about their reactions.
I so there were some former coworkers, and also so I work part-time. I still have a part-time job that with the Penguins that I've had for, oh gosh, I've been working with them for about 12 years now, 11, 12 years. And I let my bosses know there because I wanted them to know that I planned on continuing to work as much as I could,
Mhm.
and because I enjoyed what I did. And if in case I didn't look right, like, or if I didn't look well, I guess I should say that I was okay that this was all going on. And I think and I think when people have an expectation that if their friend has cancer, that the friend tells them they have cancer, or the family member tells them they have cancer. But I don't think people realize it's just every time I told someone new, I had to watch their face just drop and then
Ah,
process the information and ask the questions, which I didn't, I to this day, I'm very straightforward. If you have a question, ask me and I will totally answer it because I think it's important to have the conversations. But it was just like, it was just like reliving. It was like the worst kind of Groundhog Day of just
ah,
reliving every time you told someone, every time, and it made it very, I mean, I mean, it was definitely, when you're dealing with this all on top of, and then that's why I hit a point where I was like, I gotta come out publicly because I can't keep, telling people in person because it was just getting to be too hard.
so, Katie, as a cancer victim and a survivor, uh, perhaps you could help coach people who are reacting to someone when they are told that they have a cancer diagnosis. What type of support did you find most encouraging and supportive?
I found for me, like, for whenever I told a friend or family member what was going on, I greatly appreciated them letting me vent because you don't know. Because a lot, we're very much, we want to make people feel better. We very much want to take away their pain and their problems, which is wonderful things about people and, your loved ones and your friends. But there were, a lot of times you just wanted to be like, oh my, this is so dumb. Like, cancer is annoying. I have a lot better things to be doing than dealing with cancer and the
Would you
side
say
effects
would
of
you say that
cancer.
again? That's a lovely statement. Please say that again.
Cancer is annoying, and I have a lot better things to be doing than dealing with
Ah,
cancer. And 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 I think that's, just being able to be honest with it and having friends that you can be honest with and like, "Yeah, that's dumb. Are you gonna do what? Yeah."
how many suggestions did you get, Katie?
Of things like to, fix it,
Yes.
make it go away. I lucked out. I have to be honest. I was incredibly lucky looking at other folks and they have listening to other people's stories about dealing with a cancer diagnosis that I did not have to deal with a lot of folks saying, "Well, are you sure you want to do this path? You could do another path." And as much as I appreciate, I'm a spiritual human. I am, I love oils, I love crystals, I love, the things that but I still wanted I did the chemo route because I wanted that was the science behind it. Like everything I did, I wanted to know what I asked specific information, give me specific numbers, what is this gonna do? What's this gonna do? And but there was never anybody that was like, "Are you sure you wanna do chemo? Don't you wanna just do a lemon cleanse?" This is
Yes.
very
Okay.
dramatic.
Okay.
Like I like using things together. Like I said, I like, there have been oils that have helped me with nausea, helped me
Sure.
sleep, and but at the same time, I still wanted to follow the science of things and what was going to give me the best long term prognosis.
Well, Katie, what I often suggest to my patients is that the things that I help them with and encourage and incorporate in their lives enhance and make the medication work better. However, it's no substitute for the medication itself. Science is like magic, only it's real.
Hmm. And there's a phrase in the cancer community, and I'm sure there's other communities too. They're called cancer muggles, which is a Harry Potter thing
Okay,
where they
yes.
will suggest they will suggest things that like and you're like, "No, I wanna go with the science and the."
You have now have a conceptualization of what type of cancer you have. They're formulating a treatment program for you at this point. So where were you at in your journey on at this point, Katie?
When I announced when I essentially announced it and posted on it publicly, I had already gone through my first round of chemo. I knew that, I was having a bilateral mastectomy, because as they did more testing on both sides, there were things that were like, this isn't a thing now, but this might be a thing in the future." And I
Ah,
just in my mind was like, "It needs to go." And then they found that it had gone to a lymph node under my arm, which was thankfully it was just one, so hopefully they were able, when they did the surgery, they had that removed. And but it was a lot of like it was really weird for me with a lot of I was getting to do like going into something very big, like a big event or a presentation, and I was getting a phone call right before that about how my treatment was changing because they had gotten some new information, which was a totally wild experience on top of everything else.
ah. Okay, so you have all these facts and information. Uh, when was actually the treatment program set in place, Katie?
I started, I think, what was it? Gosh, it was February, it's either 5th or 8th, like one of the first weeks of February where I had my first round of chemo. And I thought it was really funny because I worked that game night and I was like, oh yeah, I can do chemo and I'm going to go to work that night. And I
Ah,
walked in to the office where I work and I walked in and I was like, listen, I don't have the flu and I'm not pregnant, but I'm not feeling well, and I'll explain more later. And I tried to stay, and I left early because I couldn't handle it. And that's another thing with like when you go through these chemo treatments is they manage all the side effects, but you might try different medications to manage those side effects. And there's kind of like a combination that works specifically for you that might not work for somebody else. And what I had taken, the anti-nausea medication, my blood pressure had just dropped so significantly, for as a side effect that we had next time I went to chemo, we we did things a little bit differently, so I didn't have that feeling the second time.
okay. For somebody who has never experienced chemotherapy, could you walk us through that first treatment, please?
So what happens is, for me, when we started this whole thing, is I had a port placed, and a port is essentially just an access point for where I got the chemo infusions. And what the nice thing was is they used this port every single time I had chemo. So they were able to just kind of go into this without having to prick me with a needle every time in my hand or my arm. Because if you're not able to do a port, or if you don't want to do a port, you would have to get essentially an IV every time you went. But they were able to go right into my port, which was a weird experience because this port goes right into your heart to essentially to help use your heart to spread the chemo throughout your body. And it's a really weird thing to have your heart, which is obviously pumping the blood throughout your body, and essentially using it to spread poison throughout your body, which is
Ah,
what is actually happening to kill the cancer. And when you go in for your chemo treatments, they clean off your port because, like I said, it goes straight to your heart. So you have to take very good care of it and make sure it's comfortable, or you're keeping it clean. And it's weird because it's a foreign body, so it's kind of slide. Not it sits still, but you'll kind of, as you move your muscles, it'll rub against there, and you're like,
ah,
that's weird. And but when you go in, they clean it with saline, and you'll go the first or second time for chemo, and you will taste that saline, and then you will
mm,
learn to put something in your mouth while they clean it, so you never have to taste the taste of saline in your mouth again,
ah.
because it's the weirdest feeling. And then they hook the IV up with, and then it feels a little cool, and then it just kind of goes throughout your body, and you sit there, and depending on the type of chemos, a few different kinds of chemo, depends on the length of time, and to get it throughout your body, and you just kind of hang out and wait for it to do its job, and then you go home and flush all the liquids to get it out of your body.
Okay. Flush, meaning you drink a lot of water?
Yes, all the fluids you can handle, because you want it in there to do its job, and then you want it out because it's, like I said, it's weird because you're essentially poisoning yourself, so you can get rid of a thing that's worse than the poison.
Okay, so what we often help people do is let them know that when we have minds of uncertainty, that can lead to minds of anxiety, worry, and fear. And we try to replace that with a mind of knowledge and awareness. So, how much knowledge and awareness were you given or did you gather about the chemotherapy process that helped you get through it?
I had I wish, if you're watching on video, I have a notebook. It's this big, like a binder of papers that I have saved this whole process, because it was every time you went, you got more information and new information, which was great. And they were always good about giving you handouts and things to read up on. And like I said, I felt like I cheated on this whole process because I had already gone through it with my mom. So I knew what worked for her, what the experience was going to be like, how I was going to feel. And but I was trying to, I was asking her questions, and how does this feel, and how did you go, and like the nurse oncologists, and asking them questions. And but it was definitely trying to get as much information as I could without overloading my brain, which is a weird fine balance of things.
So, how did you avoid researching Dr. Google too much and actually going to people who had that specific knowledge?
I have to admit, and I say this because I think it was the thing that pushed me over the edge, was when I felt a lump in my right breast, and I was like, "This could be a thing, this might not be a thing," and I started looking on Google, because that's what you do, is you research on
Sure.
Google, because it was midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and I was looking this up night after night, and there was a specific side effect for me, was a consistent sore throat on one side.
Uh,
And that was kind of the side effect to me that was like, okay, so maybe we need to get this looked at. And what is essentially has happened, you get the sore throat because the lymph node is reacting to the cancer.
hmm.
And so that's why I had this consistent sore throat. But yeah, there were points I was going way above and beyond, and I had to trust my oncologist to tell me what I needed to know, and I had to trust my surgical oncologist to tell me what I needed to know, because you start every single study and this and that, and you Google every word that they're telling you, because you're like, "What's this word mean? What's this mean?" And then you
Yeah.
just
So, talk to us about developing the trust that you had in your treatment team and how that affected you and how that helped your recovery.
I lucked out because my oncologist, Dr. Puhala, when I was before I told a lot of people, especially like my bosses at work, I was working a Pens game with one of my coworkers, Lori, who has done work with UPMC in the Hillman Center. And I had mentioned to her what was going on because I knew that she would understand what was going on and I could talk to her without, like, I could ask her questions without her. Because there's also the thing when you tell people, sometimes people don't take it well and they freak out and you want to tell them that they're okay. And I knew being able to talk to Lori, I could ask her, how did she know Dr. Puhala? How did she feel? And she's like, "You will love her." And having somebody who knew my oncologist and tell me that made it so much easier going into the process. And then I met her and I was like, "Okay, this is awesome." And she got a feel for me. Dr. Paula got a feel for me and what I wanted to know. Dr. Lee, my surgical oncologist, got a feel for me and what I wanted to know. And they knew I wanted information. I wanted numbers. Give me your statistics. Tell me, what if I do this, what are the chances for this and this and they learned what kind of information I was looking for and they were prepared to have those conversations with me, which I appreciated because I think everybody, like I said, everybody handles it differently.
Yes, yes, they do. So, if you had any fear, Katie, how did you confront that and deal with it?
I did a lot of, I cried a lot during
Uh,
this process,
yeah.
and I don't and because it was so cathartic for me, because I realized that I was going into these things like, "Yeah, I got this," and, like, in my head, "I got this, I'm gonna get through this." But then, you kinda you stop for a minute, and then that's when your body kinda catches up and your emotions catch up with you, and you're like, "Oh, wait." And I did, like I said, I had a good resource in my mom and being able to ask her questions. But yeah, it was a lot of just and trying to and we were busy with appointments that it was like something was always going on and then that kind of helped with things too because it was a distraction.
Yes, and in the midst of that, the world uh, made a choice that this COVID virus decided to make an appearance. So tell us how that played into your treatment.
I have to I have to laugh at some of the way things just shook out in this process because it's you couldn't write this. I feel like there's moments where I giggle and things that at a certain point were like, "Oh, this is the worst thing that could have happened," ended up being positives in the long run. And I was like, "All right, cool. We got this." And for me, it was I had planned on, I had a date in mind where I was like, I'm going to post it on social media because I was getting closer and closer to when I was going to start losing my hair. And I am tall blonde Katie, and I've been tall blonde Katie for as long as I can remember. And that was going to be a huge tell that something was going on. And I
Yes.
was like, what happened to your hair? And I was getting closer and closer to the date of when I was going to have to cut my hair. And I knew, what point that was going to be. And so I was like, all right, I got to tell people. And I told my boss of the Penguins, what was going on. And we were talking about head wraps and was like, are you okay if I wear a head wrap? Because I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable wearing a wig right away. And, just like talking through these whole, like making all these plans. Cause I think that's was something that helped me was like, I'm going to make plans and try to, that'll make me feel a little bit better about stuff. And so I hit the week that I absolutely had to say something publicly before people were going to see that I didn't have any hair. And because and I worked a game where it was like I had my head shaved and I had a wrap on my head. So I knew people had to know. And then I was like, we're gonna do this. And then I announced, and everybody's like, okay, we're gonna go to the movies together. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna do. I made so many plans, and then a week later, COVID hit.
Ah, yes.
I was like, "Are you kidding me with this timing?"
Hmm. So here we are, 4 days before Christmas Eve. You lose your job. Christmas Eve, you don't get a call from Santa Claus. You got a call from uh, telling you about confirming your diagnosis, and your insurance terms at the end of December, and a few months later, the world goes into lockdown.
Yeah, and it was the weirdest like I said, it was like I couldn't have, like, put all this together if I tried to put this all together because it was just like, okay, cool. Like that phrase, okay, cool, was just like, all right, this is the next thing. All right, we gotta change our plans. Okay, cool. So I was doing that whole pivot thing way before everybody else had to start pivoting.
So you were flexible. You learned how to deal with life without definitive expectations.
Mhm. 'Cause
What?
it was you like I said, a lot of it kept changing, and like, we would think that I only needed a like, for example, a lumpectomy where they were just gonna take the tumor out, and they're like, "No, we gotta it's too much of a risk, the rest of the area," and I'm like, "Okay, cool. You might need chemo, you might not." And then I don't even know if I've told, the Sorgs this. I might have, I can't even remember at this point, everything blends together, but I was getting ready to do a presentation at Point Park, and I got a phone call 10 minutes before my presentation going, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna have to do chemo," and I was like, "Okay, cool."
Ah,
And, like, having to switch gears from that to, like, "Let's talk about social media."
ah.
It was but it
Oh,
was, like, a lot of those pivots, like, you hear that word.
okay, so I would probably suspect that there's ups and there's downs during the course of your treatment. Katie, could you tell us about that, please?
I there are days where and there's still days, like, this is I've finished, like, I've done the chemo, I've done the surgery, I've done radiation, and, there's still days where I'm great, we're gonna do great, and we're gonna go back and have a, quote, unquote, "normal life," and we're gonna get back to where I was, and then there's days where you just cannot get out of like, I can't get out of bed because it's just like, oh my gosh, between cancer and the pandemic, it's hard to pep talk yourself out of some of these situations.
We have many more stops along Katie's journey to recovery, which we will be discussing in our next podcasts. And as always, we offer a free prescription at the end of every podcast. Fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Unplug your television and take up fishing. And for a truly mindful experience, we suggest that you fish without bait. Do a kindness for yourself and do a kindness for another. Forgive yourself and forgive another. Till all are free, none are free. Namaste, my friends.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.